On March 2nd, 1917, the U.S. grants citizenship to the people of Puerto Rico. But how did the U.S. gain control of Puerto Rico in the first place? And what is Puerto Rico's government like today? Puerto Rico is located on an island about 1,000 miles south of Florida between the Dominican Republic and the Virgin Islands. Spain began colonizing the island in 1508 when Juan Ponce de León established the first Spanish settlement on the island. The U.S. won control of Puerto Rico in the Spanish-American War in 1898. In 1900, Congress created a civil government on the island, and U.S. President William McKinley appointed Charles Herbert Allen as the first civilian governor. World War I broke out in 1914. The U.S. was initially neutral. A month before entering the war in 1917, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Jones-Shafroth Act, making Puerto Rico a U.S. territory and granting its residents statutory U.S. citizenship. This meant that citizenship was imparted by statute rather than guaranteed by the Constitution. At the time of this 1917 act, the U.S. afforded Puerto Ricans the right to refuse U.S. citizenship and maintain their Spanish or other citizenship. The Jones-Shafroth Act also included a Bill of Rights and set up a U.S.-style three-branch government. 4 congressional acts between 1927 and 1952 further defined the nature of citizenship for Puerto Ricans. In 1917, Puerto Rico had 1.2 million inhabitants. As citizens, Puerto Ricans could enlist in the U.S. Army, but few chose to do so after gaining citizenship. President Wilson instituted the draft 2 months later in May 1917, and 236,000 Puerto Ricans registered. 20,000 were drafted to serve during World War I. Some were sent to guard the important Panama Canal, which had recently opened in 1914. Others were sent to Europe's Western Front. Puerto Ricans of African descent were placed in racially segregated units. 65,000 Puerto Ricans served in the U.S. military during World War II, while 61,000 served in Korea and 48,000 served during the Vietnam War. The 1917 Jones-Shafroth Act sparked a wave of immigration to the U.S. mainland. 42,000 Puerto Ricans migrated during the 1920s, mostly to New York. This mass migration inspired the hit Broadway musical West Side Story. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor is of Puerto Rican descent, as both of her parents were born on the island. In 1951, Puerto Rican voters approved a new U.S. law granting the islanders the right to draft their own constitution. In March 1952, Luis Muñoz Marin, Puerto Rico's governor, proclaimed Puerto Rico a freely associated U.S. Commonwealth under the new Constitution. The status became official in July 1952. Today, Puerto Rico's governor and legislature are elected by the people. Both the governor and the U.S. president possess the power to veto laws enacted by the legislature. Judges are chosen by the governor and approved by the island's Senate. In many ways, this is similar to the way U.S. state governments function. Puerto Ricans, however, do not have voting representation in the U.S. Congress, nor can the island's citizens vote in U.S. presidential general elections, although they do play a role in determining the major party presidential candidates in the primaries. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1807, Congress passes an act abolishing the African slave trade effective January 1, 1808. In 1836, Texas declares independence from Mexico, becoming an independent nation for the next 9 years. In 1904, Theodore Seuss Geisel, better known to the world as Dr. Seuss, is born in Massachusetts. In 1962, Wilt Chamberlain of the Philadelphia Warriors scores 100 points in an NBA game. In 1983, Sony releases the first ever compact disc player in the United States for the price of $730. In 1995, Sasha Bryansky, bodyguard for Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin, dies in Moscow at age 112. In 2020, Paris's Louvre Museum begins a 4-month shutdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And now it's time for our Today in History quiz. Which treaty ended Russia's participation in World War I? The Treaty of Versailles, the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, or the Treaty of Sèvres. Liked learning about Puerto Rico? Then you'll love this one about another territory acquired by the US in the 19th century, Hawaii. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.